am hopeful that this investigation will get us even more answers. The premier and members of his government must fully comply with the RCMP about what exactly happened here.
Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles, they're reacting to the news the RCMP will be investigating the Ontario government's decision to open up parts of the Greenbelt for development. This summer, Ontario Premier Doug Ford came under fire after the province's Auditor General and Integrity Commissioner concluded that some developers got preferential treatment during the process. In a statement, the Premier's office says it will fully cooperate with the investigation, writing, "We have zero tolerance for any wrongdoing and expect anyone involved in the decision-making about the Greenbelt lands to have followed the letter of the law. Out of respect for the police and their process, we will not be commenting further at this time." Let's bring back the front bench to unpack the politics of that. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benziar with me. Rob, you were the first to report on this today. How significant a development is it?
It's hugely significant in the provincial context, Vassy, because this is now a criminal investigation. It was a scandal before. You know, the allegation was that there was profiteering of up to $8.3 billion potentially, according to the Auditor General's report into this land swap scandal. Now, for people outside the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, this is about 7,400 acres of land that was removed from this 2 million acre swath of protected greenbelt, and it was opened up for housing development. Premier Doug Ford said that that land was needed now to build houses. Ontario has a housing crisis. They're promising to build 1.5 million homes in the next decade. They won't reach that target because it's almost impossible to do that. But they were pulling out all the stops, and the problem was haste makes waste, and they now have a very debilitating scandal on their hands, and they don't control the timeline anymore, Vassy. Even though Ford has canceled the land swap and they will not build on this land, and you know, they haven't heard any litigious stuff from the developers who are affected yet, but they might. They don't control it anymore, the timeline. It's now in the hands of the Mounties, and we all know, having seen this movie before when it comes to police investigations of politics, these things can unravel really, really quickly. So they are in a bit of a panic at Queen's Park tonight.
I guess I was thinking back to when, just after the Premier, Lisa, had said, "I made a mistake, we're giving the land back, I shouldn't have done what I did." We had been together as a group, I believe, and we were kind of talking about how to measure whether the political impact of this would be lasting or not. Does the fact there will be an RCMP investigation, the specter of it looming, does that change that calculation for you at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'll have to see what comes of it. But the biggest difference for me, Vassy, is we've gone from a situation where private citizens could not be compelled to be interviewed by an ethics commissioner, could not be compelled to be interviewed by an auditor, but they can be compelled to be interviewed by the RCMP. So for the first time, we're going to see developers who are going to be asked serious questions by serious trained investigators. And if there is something afoot here, they're going to get to the bottom of it. And I will just be very clear. If there is something afoot here, then as a conservative, I'm going to tell you, full extent of the law, prosecute them as far as I'm concerned, especially given the trust, the public trust that's been put in their hands.
Tom, I think that, you know, for a long time, the political sort of assessment here has been based on, does it stink to Ontarians, right? Does the idea, the prospect, the narrative that the Premier was in it to help his friends out more than the rest of the public, will it stick? If there is, and it is an if at this point, I want to be clear, all they've done is confirm an investigation. But if there is the possibility of criminal activity, how much worse does it make it for the government?
I think, well, simply on legal grounds, it's a lot worse. You recall that they were trying to, at first, after the OPP handed it over to the RCMP, they were saying, well, there's not an investigation by the RCMP. They're going to be studying whether or not there will be an investigation. Well, that other shoe has just dropped. And it is very serious when you say you've got the highest ranking police force in the country doing a criminal investigation of your government. So Doug Ford can say, oh boy, I hope they find those scandals, all he wants. The average Ontarian is sort of going, but hold it, weren't those all people who were under you because you're the Prime Minister? So there's going to be a lot of really nervous people around Doug Ford. This thing did stink, and it is starting to stick. And I think that both those things are going to lead to a lot of problems for Doug Ford. I think he did the wise thing in trying to take out the garbage, just saying, okay, we're canceling this thing, even though he had said he would take all of the recommendations of the Auditor General, except that one. He finally was forced to do the right thing. But it's not going to save him from a criminal investigation or any of the people around him, if indeed any of them have done anything wrong. So stay tuned. This could get really messy for them in very short order.
Yeah, I can only imagine what's going on behind the scenes right now, Brian, because I do feel from the people I've spoken to, I'm sure Rob has spoken to even more, they did feel like they had gotten a bit of a reprieve after that apology, like at least they could start announcing other things and every question was not focused on that subject. I wonder now how, if or how they pivot, because the questions will be all about this investigation. I know they're saying they're not going to comment, but they're still going to get a number of questions about it. Do they keep saying, hey, we were wrong, we gave the land back, or do they have to add something more to that going ahead?
Well, let me start off by saying I agree with Lisa, Rob, and Tom's sort of assessment of the negative and the difficulty that the Ford government will now be facing. And I also agree with your preamble and sort of the at the heart of it, it's definitely something that's going to make this a lot more difficult to sort of run past and move on to other things. Of course, it's going to come up for quite some time now in every scrum, and there'll be questions. The one thing I would say is it is a bit different, though, than, say, a public inquiry, which our panel has discussed on other topics at a great extent. And how it's different is this is obviously, both can be very serious, but this is certainly a very serious matter, no question about that. But normally, you're not going to hear any more news until there is some type of finding, until the RCMP comes to their, or the OPP in this case, come to their conclusion. So it's for when it comes to the news cycle, there's not going to be, the beast, as they said, won't be fed every day with new nuggets and new angles and new things coming out and new testimony. It should all be done. It should. Obviously, you, Rob, and others will maybe try to make calls to see if that won't be the case. But nevertheless, it should be done in a way in which we hear nothing until the thing's concluded. So that is a different dynamic. But to the heart of your question, that's not going to stop a lot of reporters. It's not going to stop opposition parties to raise questions, and frankly, even from the opposition party point of view, make subtle accusations and sort of keep putting this into their talking point. So it's something that they're now going to have to live with for a while. But again, the idea that it's not in the news every day might be some solace. But to Rob's point, the other part that's not good about this from a pure political and comms point of view, the shoe will drop at a point that you don't really know. It could happen at any point. It could be mid-campaign for all we know, although I think authorities try to avoid that as much as they can. But nevertheless, it could be on the eve of a campaign. It could be at a very inopportune time. So that's something that's obviously very difficult for the Ford government.